Hello everyone and welcome to your horoscope for the week of October the 23rd till 29th, 2023. We have quite an intense week ahead of us, as expected, because we are still under the influence of both of the eclipses, one that has passed that took place on the 14th of October, an annular solar eclipse in the sign of Libra, but also towards the end of the week we have yet another eclipse, a partial lunar eclipse, this time in the sign of Taurus. And this is also important because this is the last eclipse that we're going to be having in the sign of Taurus for the next 8 to 9 years. So this really finishes and closes a cycle, of course, specific to the sign of Taurus. Now, if the eclipses wasn't enough, you know that everything that is going on the world stage at the present moment is escalating our feelings, is really triggering our emotions. And when it's not just the sky that is tense, but also our inner world, basically the inner sky, then the intensity feels like truly a pressure cooker ready to explode. But of course, at the very beginning of the week, we have a really powerful energy shift that in a way does amplify the intensity, but it can also have a lot of positivity to it. And at the same time, it has a very strong stabilizing factor where it kind of shifts our frequency into a singular purpose, so to speak, because in the sign of Libra, and I'm speaking about Mercury and the Sun being in the sign of Libra, that can split our frequency where we have to take care of our own personal interests, our own problems, so to speak, but then we have to pay attention and focus on our relationship, the others, basically everything around us. The Sun and Mercury entering into the sign of Scorpio, following one another very rapidly, that does change everything, where we do need to focus on something more singular and of course with great intensity. Mercury in the sign of Scorpio is basically called the investigator, the detective mind, because it can really dig very deeply, getting to the core of the problem or looking at the problem from a very complex perspective. That is something which is very how should I say, linked to Scorpio, the complexity of it all. But at the same time, that can be a very curious Mercury, but the kind of curiosity which we cannot just brush off. For example, Mercury is also really curious in its home sign of Gemini, but that's the kind of curiosity where you just want to know what the hype is about. You just need to have a basic understanding. Now, in the sign of Scorpio, that basic understanding is not enough. This is where we get into complexity and, as I said, dig deeply. If we're curious about something or someone or are after a certain kind of information, then we won't stop until our deeper sense of curiosity is kind of satisfied, so to speak. Now, the Sun following Mercury very closely, it illuminates everything, it sheds light, and of course, it combusts a little bit, especially when the Sun is from 0 to 15 degrees of Scorpio, because that is still what we consider via combusta, so the path of combustion. And at the same time, Mars and Mercury are still there this week. So that adds to the intensity. But of course, finally, towards the end of the week on the 28th, we have the partial lunar eclipse / the full moon in Taurus. And that is the highlight of this week's astrological show. But I'll speak more about this within the horoscope. And I also have a separate video about this lunar eclipse, partial lunar eclipse taking place in the sign of Taurus. If you'd like to know the details and the specific, just check it out. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And we are on the 23rd of October. And as you can see, Mercury is already in the sign of Scorpio and the Sun followed Mercury. So I would also like to wish a very happy birthday month for Scorpio natives, with the sun entering the sign of Scorpio. But also, just a few hours before the sun entered Scorpio, it was at anaretic Libra, 29 degrees of Libra. So this basically takes the theme from Libra onto Scorpio, something that is urgent, something that we are really, really sensing deeply that we need to take care of, usually something that has to do with contract, relationship, etc. On the world stage, it is very clear and evident what kind of diplomatic and alliance and even enemy issues are going to be taken into their scorpionic expression. Now, also regarding this world stage issue, the scorpionic expression can be both good and bad. It really, really depends on us and the people who hold the power that are involved. Why? Because the lower expression of Scorpio is, without a shadow of a doubt, intensity, destruction, getting what you want through any means. It doesn't matter what you need to do. You know, it really, really justifies the action. The higher expression of Scorpio is rebirth and transformation. That is where we can very well alchemize everything basically that is being highlighted in the present moment into peace, into a compromise, into basically something that actually works. Scorpio is very, very efficient at making things function, making things work with a certain kind of compromise. So, and that can transform, alchemize, transmute the collective situation and feelings into something, you know, their higher octave. And Scorpio, without a shadow of a doubt, is the most powerful symbol and sign of alchemy and transformation and transmutation. So this is where it's not just the sun and Mercury and Mars, the ruling planet of Scorpio, being in it, giving us the option to transmute. It's almost like a necessity. All of us will need to transmute energies, feelings, things in our lives, because what we do in our lives will, of course, reflect externally. So it's really, really an important period and also an important beginning of the week. So this is the first, let's say, side of the coin at the beginning of the week, because we have a lot of other energies as well. For example, Venus is still holding a trine, a conversation of supreme harmony with Jupiter. And this is really important because this provides the saving grace. Jupiter in the sign of Taurus can represent, you know, our sense of justice regarding values, regarding basic needs, basic necessities, but also traditional values, self-worth, etc. Venus in the sign of Virgo represents everything that is actually practical and working, a healthy sense of pride, a healthy sense of need. And why do I say a healthy sense of need? Sorry. While in the sign of Taurus, Jupiter can be very expensive. It doesn't really represent the subjectivity of it, that our what we think, what we believe that our needs are actually as necessary, as imperative as we might be feeling. Now, Venus in the sign of Virgo is exactly that, the element of balance, because Venus in Virgo is actually, how should I say, a rational, very down to earth approach to every Venusian matter. Now, that in a way is uncomfortable, because who would like to limit their desires and whatever makes them happy and their own feelings about their needs? Because Virgo is an earth sign as well. But it is exactly, this is the specific of Venus in Virgo. It looks at the situation through a very down-to-earth approach, a very rational approach, the home sign of Mercury after all. So it has a very balanced take on it. And it is this balanced take that really gives the blessing here, because both Jupiter and Venus were considered by the ancient planets which bestowed blessings. The great benefic Jupiter, the lower benefic Venus, and whenever they converse in harmony, well, that is one way or another good news for all of us. And them being an earth sign, this gives me a lot of hope, because this means practical hope. This means hope that can help the situation even physically, even materially. Now, regarding the international situation, it's very obvious that this can represent like any kind of humanitarian or diplomatic or whatever efforts, because Venus and Virgo, whatever that works, that actually does something productive, does something useful, and this to me acts like the saving grace. Now, Venus is gonna pick up speed all throughout the week, where she will, of course, abandon the trine with Jupiter, but she will start holding the trine with Uranus. And Venus is basically the ruling planet here because she rules the sign of Taurus. Now, Venus and Uranus are not going to perfect their trine this week yet, but towards the end of the week, that trine can still be felt. It is becoming operational. So, this Venusian energy is going to stay with us all throughout the week, but in different expression. And, this is, again, the saving grace. The other saving grace is that as soon as the Sun and Mercury enter the sign of Scorpio, they immediately hold a trine, a conversation again of supreme harmony with Saturn in the sign of Pisces. Now, from an emotional, moral, psychological even perspective, why not humanitarian perspective, Saturn in the sign of Pisces, what is acceptable in the name of faith and spirituality and what is not. And Saturn is the concrete, it is the real, it is the action, how it is that we embody our faith. And if we would like to embody our faith in an unacceptable way, let's say, well, this is where Saturn's influence is truly a saving grace. Saturn retrograde in the sign of Pisces, it evokes the past. And if needs to, all the horrors, all the, dark side of the past. Why? In order to prevent them from ever happening again. Because Saturn, not so long ago, was holding the very same trine with Mars. Mars in the sign of Scorpio. So that was the element of evocation, where we could see the horrors of the past being with us in the present, and that triggered the alarm bells that we collectively and individually alike cannot be permissive of this. The Sun and Mercury holding the same trine with Saturn, well, this is where the planet of the mind, Mercury figures out something, or Mercury comes up with a plan, with a methodology, and as a side note, this is really good for communication and information, because not so long ago, in the sign of Libra, especially at the very end degrees, Mercury was quincunxed by Neptune, and that means truth, half truth, and even if you are given the facts, you cannot decide for yourself what exactly is the truth that you can integrate within yourself. Here in the sign of Scorpio, the energy is totally different because Mercury is very, very serious. Mercury's slightly obsessive tendencies, they become useful because we can just know, and with trine Saturn even feel what is, and I'm so sorry to use this term, BS. That is where the BS is much more quickly and easily brushed off, so we can focus on that which is not BS, as subjective as truth may be in this sense. And the Sun, as I said, illuminating, the Sun giving the light helps us that much more. But also the Sun and Mercury conjunction is very, very useful. In other terms, this is a really, like every year, we have this basically every year, the Sun and Mercury in the sign of Scorpio. This is really good for scientific research, for investigation, for paleontology, for, science in a medical sense, because the sign of Scorpio many times in certain situations rules surgeries, rules medical interventions, rules when something is eliminated from our body, like operation cut out. It is basically extracted. And of course, Scorpio also rules purges. So, this is where we are having a strong moment of elimination. And in very many cultures, certain religious and spiritual customs and traditions, which have to do with, withdrawing from something and giving our bodies the time and the chance to eliminate toxins, etc. Like, I'm not sure if I'm using the right terminology here, Lent perhaps, and detoxes, etc., etc. Those usually coincide with Scorpio season. So that is also part of the picture, especially from a spiritual and even health-wise perspective, because detox is always a very welcome, activity, because it really, really gives us powerful health benefits. Now, Sun, Mercury, and Mars simultaneously being in the sign of Scorpio, this also amps up, other elements in our lives, like, for example, sexuality, because usually Scorpio rules the reproductive organs, but also, the chakras. So when Mars is there, these desires are much more amplified than usually. And with the Sun conjunct Mercury, this is the moment when secrets are being told, when big coming outs are, this is the period for them. And when I say coming out, of course, this can be like a sexual preference sense, but also when someone has a secret and they do need for some reason to share it or come out, that is very well, included. Pluto grinding down, advancing towards 29 degrees of the sign of Capricorn. Well, this can be political secrets, secrets of world leaders. So this period is going to be filled with secrets and conspiracies and all of that, because, Neptune anoretic, Neptune retrograde, this is part of the season. But, some of the revelations and disclosures are really going to be significant, because they will present the reality of the situation, and that can lead to peace, that can lead to resolution, that can lead to a lot of positive things. But as I say, it can, because the choice is really ours, collectively speaking. Now, also, as soon as the Sun and Mercury enter the sign of Scorpio, they are conjunct the dwarf planet Haumea, and that is one of the most unusual dwarf planets, even physically speaking, because its revolution is super, super fast, revolving around her own axis, and she has an X shape. So that represents quantum creativity. And especially in the sign of Scorpio, that means the unity of mind and unconscious over matter. Just one element of these two is not really sufficient, but when our minds and our unconscious are not perfectly aligned, because that might not be all that much possible without years and years and years of a certain kind of like Buddhist lifestyle, but a good attempt is understanding ourselves, understanding our beings, and our beings' aspirations is enough for this. That can create a lot of, positive synchronicities in our lives, and can bring solution to a lot of problems. But these solutions might be very, very new, unusually, never tried before. So Haumea is really good for experimentation. Now, another energy that is ultimately positive, and I have to show you the this is where asteroid Vesta, so protector of the home, protector of the family, goddess of the sacred flame. It was her fire that protected Rome, and the holy virgins, the Vestals, the priestesses of Vesta, dedicated their whole existence to keep and chastity and all of that, to keep the sacred flame, the flame of protection going. Now, Vesta can be interpreted as basically a goddess energy, the most protective, emotionally nurturing, and the most benevolent side of the divine feminine. And this Vesta holds a trine to Mars. And I find that really, really beautiful because this is a water trine and Mars is in the sign of Scorpio. It has a very strong influence. Vesta, on the other hand, is in the sign of Cancer, Cancer, which has a lot to do with her core symbolism: family, home, protection, unity. And the sign of Cancer also rules, in mundane astrology, ethnicities, and, the interconnectedness, the emotional and cultural and spiritual bond between people belonging to the same ethnicity, etc., etc. So this is a really, really good energy because Vesta, in a sense, demands compassion. Vesta demands humanity. I don't necessarily, perhaps humanitarian action is not the best word, but for every action to be aligned with the human spirit in that sense. So this energy can be really, really positive. And I know it's a trine, and trines are always positive, right? But in the present context, this can also have a certain dark side because, a trine empowers and it doesn't discriminate. So it can even empower those people who are a little bit fanatic about protecting their own culture, etc., etc. Why? Because Mars in the sign of Scorpio, so the intent is there. But anyway, let's focus on the most positive expression. This is where it can unite everyone, regardless of ethnicity and etc., for a common benevolent purpose. So, and this energy can play out personally, individually as well, where Vesta can bring the support of family, people who you regard as your brother, sister's family. Um, it can bring a lot of solidarity in existing relationships. And when I say relationship, it's not necessarily romantic, any kind of very strong bonds. Brother, sister, very good friends, soulmate, romance, of course, as well, parents helping children, children helping parents. So this energy is of a strong solidarity where together you invest your powers for a really good purpose, a purpose that can be something in the life of one of the people in the family, for example, and the common efforts are going to help greatly. Another energy that is very relevant is that Juno, also at the beginning of the week, is still conjunct Black Moon Lilith in the sign of Virgo. Now, Black Moon Lilith in the sign of Virgo is a very, very strong hair splitting attitude, but from all of us. Virgo represents its darker expression, especially discrimination, labeling. I don't even want to give it. I think it's better if I do not give examples to labeling, because I think all of us kind of understand the labeling, especially in the present context. That's why I don't want to go into details. So that part of the energy, the discriminatory energy, is greatly amplified. But at the same time, Juno is the planet asteroid of partnerships. So that energy can play out in a different way where for the sake of partnerships, because some partnerships are not optional, there is a very strong codependency, especially between neighbors, if you know what I mean. Because your neighbors are not going to go anywhere, you're not going to go anywhere. So agreements and certain compromises are a must. So this is where I kind of have a certain hope that this energy can play out in a very positive sense, because Black Moon Lilith in the sign of Virgo also represents a very aggressive kind of take no BS attitude and way of thinking. So if one of the allies, let's say, is full of BS, then Black Moon Lilith challenges that greatly, and chances are every partner challenges the BS as well. So, but individually speaking, this might not be a very easy energy within partnerships, marriages, and work alliances, so projects, etc., associations, because this is where every partner or everyone involved is hair splitting and analyzing and maybe judging the situation very intensely, so to speak. And finally, we're still at the beginning of the week. Another aspect that I find very interesting, and I have to show you here. White Moon Selena, still conjunct the North Node in the sign of Aries, all throughout the week holds a trine, so a conversation of supreme harmony with the galactic center at 27 degrees of Sagittarius. Now, White Moon Selena is our soul's highest expression. If Black Moon Lilith is the primordial, the primer animalistic, even the dark side within our soul and emotions, White Moon Selena is the opposite. It is the highest octave, the gentleness, the nobility, and the highest aspiration that our soul can achieve through the most harmonious means, of course, because harmony is the specific of White Moon Selena. So trining the galactic center is quite hopeful, because this is where we will have a lot of energy straight from the divine intelligence or the divine heart or the divine's very own creative center. Energy will be sent directly into our own emotional world, into our soul, our higher self, basically. So this gives me quite a lot of hope in that sense. But of course, also White Moon Selena is gonna be exactly at later on in the week squared by Pluto. So it's not an easy energy, because Pluto in the sign of Capricorn, now going direct, can represent all the challenges that present life in a certain way, that can darken White Moon Selena, that can take away her hope, that because hope is her greatest power. Hope, unconditional love, and detachment from the dirt, from extreme density, extreme heaviness in 3D. We cannot escape, neither should we, but we can elevate ourselves. It is basically, symbolically speaking, our wings which keep us above dirty ground, you know, when it's really, really dirty and heavy. So Pluto challenges that. Pluto in the sign of Capricorn either can represent, individually speaking, like financial problems where you simply cannot find the resources. Why? Because that's how society is built. It's limitative to the small people. Or it can represent challenges at your work, at your career, at your job, the gatekeepers not allowing you to have your recognition, for example, not allow you to shine. It can represent authoritarian figures like bosses, leaders, even the state or government or local authority. It can represent parents, parental figures. It can represent, you know, something above you that challenges you greatly. Now, in some cases, depending, of course, where this Capricorn, 27 degrees of Capricorn falls into your chart, it can represent like inanimate things, let's say, which have power over you. Substances, a situation, codependency. So White Moon Selena is challenged by all that. But the Galactic Center gives her the strength, the belief, and the divine infusion. This is where the divine is sharing a tiny proportion, a little drop, let's say, of its own will with us to strengthen our own, especially that the divine will and our own will, ideally speaking, should be, it might be exaggerated to say one and the same, but how should I express this? Very intertwined harmoniously with one another. So, yes. Now, after all of this being said, let's move on to the other days. Now, on the 24th, first of all, I would like to wish Nick Fury, a really, really talented and wonderful artist and spiritualist himself, a very happy birthday and solar return. If you'd like to check out his artwork, I'm going to link his website in the description box below. Feel free to do so. So very happy birthday, solar return, Nick. But besides Nick's birthday, the moon is gonna conjunct Saturn. So as I said, the reality check, the positive kind of reality check, that the stability that Saturn offers to the Scorpio planets, the moon conjunct Saturn, we're gonna feel that. Even if it's a trine, this energy has, different sides to it. Moon conjunct Saturn, well, this is where we feel the reality of the situation, which might not always be all that delightful. Why? Because the dark side of Pisces is, also victimization, victimhood. And I'm not saying necessarily self-victimization, but when there is a victimhood that can be felt very, very intense, especially if the aggression or the problem is ongoing. But at the same time, this can solidify feelings because there is the victimhood, the dark, the doom and gloom there without shadow of a doubt. But there is also hope. There's also solution. There's also help. There's also everything that we can do against Saturn trining the Sun and Mercury, and the Moon consolidating it through our feelings. Now on the 25th, the Moon is going to conjunct Neptune. So this can also give us a very, very... Oh, before the Moon conjuncts Neptune, it's going to stand across the sky from Venus. Now, this is a delicate energy because, as I said, Venus is not able to bring forward her highest qualities in the sign of Virgo. She is very, very analytical. The heart should not be analytical. Love, the principle of love, the principle of attraction, is better if it's not analytical, so to speak, because if it's not analytical, it's romantic, it is divine, it is basically coming from the depth of our soul. Anyway, that would be Venus in the sign of Pisces. But this opposition between Venus and the Moon, as I said, to me personally, this is also a positive energy because it keeps us in reality. The Moon in Pisces is dreamy. So, of course, around the 24th, 25th, we must expect dreams and, sometimes even prophetic dreams. Our inner being is definitely going to communicate with us through dreams, very symbolic dreams. Why? Because as the Moon transits the sign of Pisces, it's going to hold a trine one after another with the Scorpio planets. So these two signs linked together, that's what it means. Scorpio our instinctual inner intelligence of our being, the usage, the practical usage of our inner voice. And then the moon in Pisces, of course, our feelings and dreams and how the unconscious and conscious communicate. So we can expect this. And Venus opposing this moon keeps us in reality. For example, this is where silly wishful thinking, but that which is truly silly, not that which is fueled by healthy faith, just wishful thinking and, even victimization, because as I said, the moon in Pisces, the dark side of it, all of the emotions and fantasies which might distract us and take us away from our own reality, chances are going to be kept, within um, their own prison, within their own detriment. And then the moon is conjunct Neptune on the 25th, and that is basically magic. That is prayer. That is faith. Of course, Neptune represents the illusion as well, the psychological warfare that is so obviously and clearly playing out on the world stage. But let's ignore that for a second. It can represent our own spiritual power, the power of prayer. Neptune, and not just prayer, any spiritual expression where we draw in the divine energy, the divine mind, the divine consciousness. We evoke it, we invoke it, we breathe it into ourselves, because Neptune is sextiling Pluto and Uranus at the same time. Okay, these sextiles are not precise, but they are still operational. So the moon will join Neptune. So that's a very, very, very strong spiritual, psychological energy that can influence everything. And now let us go to the highlight of this astrological show, where we have the eclipse, the full moon taking place in the sign of Taurus. Now you can see here the moon opposing the sun. The sun is very close to a Mercury and Mars conjunction. And I'm going to be speaking about this Mercury and Mars conjunction separately. But, the sun's vicinity is very important. Mercury, planet of the mind. Mars, planet of will and action, then the karmic activator and all of that. The sun brings the light, the truth, our consciousness. Mercury, the rationale, the understanding, the results of the investigation, and also the ongoing investigation. And when I say investigation, let's not just understand the collective energy and what needs to be investigated. And Mercury rules the media. Mercury conjunct Mars, the media is going to be extremely aggressive. Super, super intense and aggressive. Over flooding, overdoing it. Why? Because both of these planets hold an almost exact opposition to Jupiter, planet of expansion. Now, as I said, I'm going to be speaking about this just a bit later on. But as I said, the sun brings the light to this picture. So that is very, very important. The other luminary, the moon, is near Jupiter. Now, some astrologers consider this a conjunction, others not yet. I'm one of those who not yet, but their vicinity is already activating the expression. So neither the sun and the moon are alone in their parts of the sky. And as I said, next to this full moon, so again, the opposition of the sun and the moon, there is another precise opposition, Mars, Mercury, and Jupiter. So, this can have a very, very strong intensity to it. But like any full moon, especially eclipse, even if it's partial, the eclipse part is not very powerful in that sense, because it's not very precise. There is a considerable distance between the moon and the node, the north node. Even them being in separate signs, but that doesn't matter all that much. But the other energies attached to it, for example, Pluto squaring the nodes of the moon, Pluto squaring, as I said, Aries as well, White Moon Selena, the South Node as well. And then I do believe asteroid Pallas Athena is also moving into position to hold the square with Pluto. So that is a very strong, heavy, and karmic energy. And that's why that part is going to add an intensity to this lunar eclipse in the sign of Taurus. Now, this energy is financial. Why? Because Taurus rules finances. At the time of the eclipse, the ruling planet of Taurus, Venus, holds a trine to Uranus, even if the trine is not precise and exact yet it's still influential. So this gives hope. This gives hope that something is gonna find a solution, resolution, or a positive termination. For example, the crisis of the five senses, the basic needs of the people involved in the conflict and any other situation, even individually speaking, this energy can give us a termination that helps us, a closure that helps us. It might have resources and be like money, for example, Venus, or love, or sensuality, or something useful and positive that we need and we deserve and we worked for it, perhaps, because Venus is in the Virgo attached to it. But us getting that karmically or materially or whatever this plays out in our lives, that ends a situation. It resets something, giving us the energy to focus on something new. And in this sense, I would like to really say the Sabian symbol of this 5 to 6 degrees of Taurus, which I did not speak about in the recording dedicated to the lunar eclipse, because the Sabian symbol is, how should I say, almost self-explanatory. Let me just read this. So the Sabian symbol says a bridge being built across a gorge. Building bridges, but this is an eclipse. So this means that a bridge that was built before is gonna collapse because that's the eclipse. But this is where collectively all together, what are we gonna do? Repair or rebuild the bridge, because the Sabian symbol plays out in all of the expressions of the full moon eclipse. The resetting one, the terminating one, where a bridge which is by now corrupted, broken, of course it has to be demolished. So in order either that it can be built anew or rebuilt, repaired, making it last for a long, long time, because that's the nature of Taurus. Whatever happens big in Taurus is meant to stay with us. Let me just give an example. The year 2000 is when we had the great conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter in the sign of Taurus. Now, that represented an economic boost. That represented a greater well-being, collectively speaking. How much of what we have in our lives today, let's say technology-wise, or why technology-wise? Because Jupiter expands. Taurus doesn't necessarily like new being installed quickly and radically. Sometimes it goes against new altogether. But because of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Taurus, new was installed very, very quickly. And us getting used to it, and that taking over our usual routines and customs, was the challenge back then in 2000. But we can see how the scientific inventions and our new value system, banking, and our fashion sense, everything basically, Taurus, has stayed with us still. The seeds of that are with us. So this is why big things in Taurus are meant to last. And next year, April next year, that very same conjunction in 2000 is going to be reactivated by Jupiter meeting Uranus in the sign of Taurus. So that means a huge quantum leap. But that's, of course, the subject of another horoscope, not really right now. So this is how I see the Sabian symbol, the eclipse based on the Sabian symbol, both individually and collectively. A bridge is collapsing, and of course this bridge connects a gorge. So that means a big catastrophe happened there a very, very long time ago, a natural one. So whatever nature given, we managed to connect. So the gorge, you know, the bridge on the gorge, that is collapsing for us to rebuild the same bridge on new and fresh foundations. So financially speaking, this can be a very important moment in our lives, individually especially, depending on where this 5 degrees of Taurus falls into your own personal chart. And if you don't know what I'm speaking about, I have a tutorial video. Check it out if you're inclined, because that might give you an idea of which area of life this eclipse is taking place for you personally. So we can expect a reset in that area of life. But because, as I said, the ruling planet Venus holds a trine with Uranus, I see this as positive surprises or technology coming to our help in a harmonious way. Why? Because Uranus is the ruling planet of technology. Virgo is the usage, implementation of technology in a practical way. So all of this energy is something that I really, really like. Now let us move on a little bit to the very end of the week, Sunday. This is where we can see that the Mercury and Mars conjunction is perfected. So the Mercury and Mars conjunction in the sign of Scorpio, on one hand, this is where everything that has to do with media, travel of information is going to be not just intense, but quite aggressive. We may feel this tiring, exhausting, and how should I say, really, really stressing us out through our 5 senses, because this opposes Jupiter, and at the time of the eclipse with precision. Jupiter is the planet of expansion, so it expands everything. It can expand this. We may feel anxiety, physical, manifested already, expressions of stress really, really weighing us down around that moment, because whatever goes on around us is way too much. But another expression of this energy is fights, battles, heated discussions, contradictory verbal battles for anything that has to do with law, in courts of justice, legislation, those who are meant to create and shape and mold the legislation. So this is where the courts of justice are going to be definitely on fire. And many of the themes raised are going to be also financial, economical, and values. You know, Taurus rules the physical earth. So land, which land belongs to whom? Vesta being in the sign of Cancer. Cancer in mundane astrology is exactly the immovable goods, the land, who it belongs to, and protection of it, legal protection, for example. So Vesta is going to sextile that Jupiter. So there is going to be a very, very strong legal debate. But in everything, Mars, acts of war, Mars conjunct Mercury, the results of investigation, and also where people, the collective, wish to take the legislation, how the collective wish to change it, transform it, transmute it. So this part can be quite heavy. No, in personal life, this can also represent very strong negotiation, especially where legislation is changing unilaterally, sometimes legislation in banking, resources, administration, anything that has to do with nations, personal economy, inner laws and legislation, and orders, if that makes sense, which regulate the economy, what belongs to who, help, legal help, uh, a lot of tumultuous things. So it really will depend on where this is in your personal chart. And also on the 29th, the moon is conjunct Uranus. We're really, really, really going to feel this. But the negative side is the anxiety of all of it. But the positive side is a shock, a surprise, because we must not forget that Venus is conjunct. Venus holds the trine with Uranus and implicitly the moon. Even if this trine is not quite exact yet, it's still operational. So it can represent really, really, really positive surprises. And you see, this is also a conjunct Black Moon Lilith, but this is, as you can see on the screen, there are two Black Moon Lilith. This is basically just like a midpoint, and this is what they would call the true one. I usually use the midpoint, but Venus is conjunct. So that also adds a greater intensity to it. A positive surprise that may delight our our instinctual forces as well. It can be a very beautiful, like, for example, sensual energy. Why not? Because Taurus is everything that delights us physically. And with Mars and Mercury conjunct together in the sign of Scorpio, that is sensuality amongst many things. Sensuality and sexuality and these kind of talks, discussions, agreements, attractions. But, amongst all this collective chaos, we do need this element in our lives as well. So I would like to finish my horoscope with the guidance that, as I said in the lunar eclipse video, this is the last moment when we have a sextile between Pluto and Neptune in the present configuration. That represents moments of very, very powerful and strong alchemy, especially that Neptune is going back, closing up to the degrees where last year in 2022 in April, we had the conjunction of Jupiter and Neptune and Venus. So that energy still lingers there. That is like a spiritual expansion like we never experienced before. Be 100% not. Maybe our ancestors might have done it in the 80s, not in the 80s, in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, that energy is there for us to use it, alchemically speaking. But we really, really need to tap into our spirituality, our healthy spirituality, and just summon the source of all love, all magic, the source of the magic of life, basically, within our lives, in the present, in the now, and use that energy to counteract the negative side of the energy, which is, of course, filling all of our lives in a very aggressive sense. This by no means has to translate into ignorance, detaching in a strong, ignorant way, or just going up in the clouds where everything is perfect. Chances are at this moment that is not an option, or that is not going to help anyone. What we have to do is, through awareness, choose love, choose faith. Even if Pluto makes us feel powerless because it squares the nodes, even if we feel the powerlessness, that's absolutely fine, because the source listening to our desires. The source always listens to our desires because that is its very nature. And, it listens to the desires of those people who wish violence, who discriminate, who want aggression. It listens. So it also listens to our choice, our voices, our desires, our choices, of course. Those of us who want to invest the energy, the collective energy, into something much more progressive with whatever brings us peace, prosperity, communion, the sense of communion. So that is what we must do, both for the collective, but also in our individual lives, because our individual lives are facing similar, chaos as we can see on the world stage out there. May it be within our relationship, partnerships, our own psyche, so to speak, because the aggression can play out just within us. A part of us doesn't agree with another part of us, and there is a battle within us that we need to bring to peace, or within our careers, or within our financial situations. One way or another, we are individually experiencing this as well. So we must choose, to invite the source into our lives. Thank you, everyone. Wishing everyone a blessed week and blessed eclipse. And if you'd like to support my work, you can like and share. That means so much to me. And you can also donate on the PayPal link in the description below. Thank you, everyone. Wishing you a blessed week. Until next time, bye for now.